What's up with Tosh Lupoi and the Oregon defense? And that question, I think, has been circulated for a few months now following the Rose Bowl, where Ohio State jumped out to a 34-0 lead, and an Oregon defense that at times had shown physicality and that got Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon and Jordan Birch and Jeffrey Bassa drafted. They kind of just folded up like a lawn chair in that game and didn't do anything. Ohio State only scored 7 points in the second half, but they obviously changed the playbook, winded things down. When it felt like Oregon maybe had some momentum, they turned it back up a little bit, or maybe they didn't, and Ohio State's offense was just that good that the Buckeyes running a Tecmo Bowl playbook moved Oregon's offense for a drive, which would still be pretty humiliating. I think Oregon is trending in the right direction under Lanning. I think the future of the sport might belong to Oregon, especially if the rules surrounding NIL aren't changed. They recruit well. They develop well. I mean, they just put double-digit players in the draft. So obviously, there's something at least going on with their NFL development. And I think collegiately they develop well. I mean, look at how their offensive lines have performed. Look at how they developed Bo Nix and how they, made Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden into good wide receivers. Look at Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq, who will be the starting tight end this year. And then look at Jordan Birch. Look at Jeffrey Bassa or Bryce Betcher, for example, who has had an awesome developmental career as a former walk-on at linebacker. When I look at Oregon, though, there is a weakness that they have, and that is Lupoi, and that is the defense. I mean, the only game I can remember in recent memory that was this bad defensively, the only playoff game that I can remember that was that poor was, it's been a while. I mean, I would say you got to go all the way back to 2019 LSU against Oklahoma. And let me let you in on a dirty secret. Ohio State's offense was not 2019 LSU level because they didn't have a Joe Moore Award O-line, and they didn't have Joe Burrow. They had Will Howard, who was great, but not Joe Burrow. And Jeremiah Smith is probably going to be a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level wide receiver, but having two instead of just one is really helpful. Now, I think Oregon's defense last season was probably better than that year's Oklahoma defense, but the point being, this was one of the worst defensive performances in a playoff game, postseason game, in a big game that I've seen in a while. I mean, you're talking about, to once again harken back to an elite Ohio State offense like the one they had this past season, you're talking about going back to 2021 or 2022 Michigan State against Ohio State to see a defensive performance that bad. So something has to be done. There has to be changes. I think that there are changes being made roster-wise. I think you look at Naeem Offord and Trey McNutt, who I actually think are going to get some playing time this year just based off what I've heard, what I've seen in the spring game, and also the fact that those players were around the same level recruit-wise as like Riley Pettyjohn for Ohio State. Naeem Offord was a part of that Ohio State class for a while before Oregon flipped him. And also along with Devin Sanchez. Like, those are all similar caliber players. McNutt, Offord, Sanchez, Pettyjohn, Delane. And some of those Ohio State guys, I think especially Sanchez, are going to get playing time. They're going to get involved. They're going to have a good impact. Why can't it be the same thing for some of these Oregon guys too? So I think recruiting-wise, developmental-wise, even position coaching-wise, they're heading in the right direction. But ultimately, if you have good position coaches, if you develop well, but you don't have the right guy to put the puzzle together, if your puzzle piece is basically good recruiting and good development and good position coaching, make it so that the puzzle pieces can actually fit together cleanly. But if the person putting the puzzle together, whether that's the head coach or one of the coordinators for one of the sides of the ball, can't put it together properly, then ultimately when it matters most in a big game and you're playing against, Ryan Day, who's one of the best in the business, and I would say is the best CEO when it comes to getting his team ready for the playoffs, well, yeah, you're going to fail. you're going to get humiliated. And that can't happen again with Oregon. I mean, they finished 13-1, 9-0, first in the Big Ten. They outcoached Ohio State the first time. And if you disagree with that, the fact that Ohio State beat them 34-0 and was capable of that shows the Buckeyes were way more talented, especially on defense. The fact that Oregon was able to even beat that team shows that they were able to outcoach them on some level. They won the Big Ten, and they reached the quarterfinals due to the bye to reward them, in a sense, for their regular season performance. And yet people have been talking about them like they've been a failure. It's the same thing as talking about TCU as a failure because they got blown up by Georgia. They weren't a failure. And the difference is TCU isn't recruiting, investing, or developing at the same level that Dan Lanning and his staff at Oregon are. So this question, before I forget, was actually submitted as a part of my mailbox where my Discord members ask me questions. If you're interested in asking me your own question, whether you're an Oregon fan or not, I take questions from all fan bases, and I will make a video about it as long as I think, it's an interesting topic of discussion, which most of your questions so far have been. Look at my Discord server. In the links in the description. Go there, click it. Link will also be posted in a pinned comment in the comments section. Join it, look for the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel, and ask your question. This was submitted by Gyro, actually an Ohio State fan. Asked is Tosh Lupoi on the hot seat. And if you're an Ohio State fan, which Gyro is, if you're any fan, I mean, I watched that game and I was, actually talking with Ohio State fans after it a bit or listening to them talk. And we were all basically saying like, holy cow, how did that happen? I know that we have Jeremiah Smith and we have Will Howard. We have an awesome running back room and our defense is incredible. But how did we jump out to a 5-score game against a team that beat us earlier in the year? It's crazy. Like, no one expected that. Even the most optimistic Buckeye fan of Buckeye fans did not expect 34-0. So that's an indictment of Lupoi. It might be an indictment of the defensive staff at large, or maybe Lanning's plan for that game, but it was horrible. And the defense under Lupoi at Oregon's always been the weakness. The offense has always been the strong suit. The Ducks' questions relate to the defense this year. Can they reload is one of my questions for them, like in a general analysis of Oregon, but that mainly relates to the defense, where they lost 2 NFL D tackles, a D end next to them, Jeffrey Bassa. They lost their entire secondary, although I think their secondary will upgrade with how they've recruited and then bringing in Theron Johnson and Dylan Thieneman. And it's also a little bit about their O-line, where they lost 2 tackles, but they got 2 good ones in the portal. And Moore is more talented, no pun intended, than Gabriel. And Mekhi Hughes is a great running back. I think Moore's going to be a breakout player. Same with DeCorian Moore. And then 2 more true freshmen, Naeem Offord and Trey McNutt, I think will be breakout players. This team isn't quite yet as deep, I think, as Texas, Georgia, Ohio State. They're deeper than those 3, maybe at some positions. But at most positions, I think those teams collectively are still a little bit ahead because Lanning came onto the fold in 2022, Sark in 21, Day in 19, and Kirby in 16. Like, those other 3 programs have an extra year over Lanning and naturally have better recruiting grounds and a better history as well to recruit off of. Regardless, they didn't stop Oregon from bringing in 31 commits and having the best recruiting class in terms of quality, averaging 93.45 points per recruit per the 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite. They had 25 4-stars, 3 3-stars, and 3 5-stars. That is the highest blue chip ratio for any recruiting class by a mile for the 2025 cycle. I think that as long as the receivers are consistent, if D tackle with Bear Alexander and Amari Washington and other players around them pan out, and then if the offense plays to its potential, this can be a really good team. But with Lupoi, so little of that could matter. If against Penn State you go on the road, Lupoi's players once again, like in the Rose Bowl, aren't following their man, Penn State loves to use motion, just like Chip Kelly did. If your guy's not paying attention, you leave a tight end wide open, like Oregon did in the first play of the Rose Bowl with G. Scott getting a 30-yard reception. And then with it being a road game in Beaver Stadium, maybe that game will be a later kick because Oregon, or that'd be if it was a noon kickoff, it'd be a 9 a.m. kickoff for Oregon. I imagine that won't happen there. Maybe it will, especially since it's the biggest game of the week. It's just having a better DC, a better coaching job there, whether that comes from Lupoi making changes or Lanning moving on from Lupoi, really will benefit Oregon. I said this before with Oregon, but imagine if the Ducks hired Jim Knowles when Jim Knowles was, it's been revealed as time's gone on, he wanted out of Ohio State after he didn't get the extension in the timeline that he wanted, for reasons that I think were motivated by impatience, and he probably could have waited and done a better job there, but still one of the best of the best. Just didn't work out for reasons, and Ohio State maybe lowballed them a bit. So, like, both sides had, miscommunications. It was an opportunity for Oregon to maybe get back at Ohio State a little bit. Like, hey, you use your DC to make sure our offense can't get up in the Rose Bowl, and our DC was helpless. Well, we're going to get Jim Knowles, especially with our defense losing as much as they are, and he can, immediately institute his schemes, build up this defense, and within a year or two, we can have one of the best defenses in the country combined with a great offensive mind in Will Stein. Instead, Penn State got him, and Oregon's going to be playing Penn State in Week 5. And that game is going to be a big game for Oregon. Same with the next game in Week 7 off the bye against Indiana at home, who's going to have an NFL QB, who upgraded at O-line, who returns a lot of good players that Cignetti's coached at Indiana or James Madison previously. This schedule is, I would say, once again, one of the easier schedules in the Big Ten, once again for Oregon, but there are challenges here. USC, Washington even on the road, Indiana at home, and Penn State on the road will find ways to score on you if your defense is not fundamentally sound. They will. And Lupoi's defenses have had weakness with fundamental soundness, with play calling, and I just have that question. It's a question from Gyro, but it's a question that I have as well. What's the situation with Tosh Lupoi? He specifically asked if Tosh Lupoi was on the hot seat. That was his verbatim question. You can let me know if you're an Oregon fan, whether or not you think they're on the hot seat or not. I would think he is. Honestly, I mean, it's been 3 years in a row, and none of his defenses have been top 10. The 23 defense was the unit that came the closest to that, and Washington still put up like a combined almost 70 points, which Washington's offense was good. Oregon's defense that year was, probably a better defense than Texas's that year, which was good, but still, they have not fielded a top 5 defense yet. And last year's defense should have taken steps forward. Roster-wise, it looked and profiled as a better unit than the one prior, and it was worse. And you saw that in the 2 Ohio State games. You saw that in the Penn State game, where Penn State, their O-line's good, and maybe it will be generational this year, but last year it probably wasn't generational, and they ran like they were a generational O-line. Like they had they had 2 Kenneth Walkers at running back. And Aller was able to scramble. Like, it was bizarre watching Oregon's final 2 games on defense and thinking, wow, like all the defensive improvements that it looked like they made were just washed away. So what do you think? Let me know in the comment section below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Very high on Oregon again as a program. I think they're one of the best programs in the country, and their ceiling's the sky. The sky's the limit. But it may be helpful to make upgrades on defense, whether that means moving on from Lupoi or somehow he changes and adapts the defense. That would be very helpful for Oregon's quest to win its first national championship.